This simulation theory documentary is bad. That's the video, the end. Okay, I'm gonna give it a little grace, mostly because nothing is ever purely good or purely bad. I think a lot of media can have a mixture of well-done elements at the same time that it can have some cracks in the concrete. In the case of A Glitch in the Matrix, a 2021 documentary on Hulu, I would say the concrete never even solidified. Although I can see the foundation of where this documentary was trying to go, I do think it suffers from so many ailments. I happened to watch this one night as an average, innocent, and curious Hulu documentary enjoyer. An hour and 50 minutes later, I was pacing my living room and angrily yelling at my TV at how insanely frustrating it is to have to witness this published piece of media. So I decided I should maybe use my YouTube platform to spread the misery that this has caused me. Today, I'm going to review A Glitch in the Matrix, provide commentary on what works and what doesn't work, and maybe together we can all laugh, cry, and learn a good lesson. I don't know. On Hulu, the brief description for this documentary is, "Are we living in a simulation?" Filmmaker Rodney Asher wrestles with this existential question, and then goes on to describe this documentary as a part sci-fi mind scrambler, part true crime horror story. Firstly, we'll get to the true crime part, and trust me, the true crime aspect is given like 10 minutes worth of attention, and then isn't examined in any in-depth way. So, weird that they had to slip true crime in there. Secondly, in all my experience watching documentaries, most of them would never describe themselves using genres of fiction. You know, if you want to sell your piece as realistic, unbiased, balanced, and exploratory, maybe calling it a sci-fi mind scrambler doesn't lend to any of that. And it doesn't help that when Hulu says, "you may also like," it offers me actual fictional sci-fi movies and not other documentaries. We're starting off on shaky footing. The film is divided into 6 chapters. The intro starts off very strongly.
Yeah. Can I do one thing before that?
We see an online video call interview with a man who is being visually dubbed over with a virtual avatar. At first, I wasn't sure if this effect was added over the real person's body, or if they just told the person to film an empty chair in their room and added the avatar afterwards. But later in the documentary, another interviewee makes a reference like, "if you see my eyes moving to the left," which means, yeah, I guess they did have a live video call and then pasted over the real men's bodies with virtual avatars. And don't worry, if you think this one is totally awesome and cool and definitely very professional for a documentary on simulation theory, then you're in luck, because there are 4 men in total that Asher turns into the main characters for this film, and all of them have their own custom VTuber models. The man being interviewed starts the entire thing by saying this.
Okay, I was in a class when I was in college, and the teacher said that we actually can map what we think about the human nervous system by the highest level of technology of the day.
By the way, when he's explaining this, the video shows someone flying over the lush, beautiful digital landscapes of Minecraft. Back to the interviewee, he says, when aqueducts were big, people believed in liquids that controlled the body. When we had telegraphs, people believed in electrical nerve impulses. So he says now we think of the brain as a computer. He acknowledges that this is a limited view that we have because we're in the 21st century. I appreciate that. Then the rest of this documentary fails to maintain this level of self-awareness. There are already a lot of problems within the first 3 minutes. Firstly, the man, and none of the men that we see interviewed, show their faces or have any on-screen credentials. They're just some guy. Secondly, he has listed out everything that relates to how we physically think of human beings. None of those things were related to existentialism, which is what simulation theory is, right? Believing that humans ran off liquid, believing that humans ran off electrical signals, believing that humans run like a computer, still is a separate thing from the actual simulated universe hypothesis. Scientific understanding of human anatomy is different from the theological belief of human position within the universe. These things might correlate, sure, but they aren't the same. The visuals here are strange, too. Most of the documentary relies on animations made in Blender 3D, a free 3D modeling and animation software, and at one point in the film they even show the damn Blender interface. It's just so professional. Anyways, this film makes its target audience known because they're not trying to depict any type of diversity here. Get used to this because there's definitely a demographic that this entire film caters to. Like most other documentaries, this one kind of jumps back and forth between certain chunks of evidence, and there is a big asterisk and quotation mark and footnote every time I say evidence in this video. One of those chunks is a clip from a conference that author Philip K. Dick spoke at in 1977. This guy's written Minority Report, Blade Runner, Total Recall, all books I've never read and movies I've never seen. But he's a science fiction girly. Man lives for robotics and the simulacra and whatnot. He starts talking about how reality is artificial, that it's a simulation. And all of this was back in 1977, which is impressive. I was surprised. It's cool that the root of this idea can be traced pretty far back, and I'm sure it goes back even further into history. The clip of Philip K. Dick at this one conference is used a lot of times throughout this 2-hour film, but it's never fully explained or examined or explored at all. They just let him say shit.
If you find this world bad, you should see some of the others. We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed.
To me, the clips are interesting, but they do nothing. He claims that we live in a simulation, but he doesn't give a call to action or anything. He doesn't tell his audience what to do about that. But I'm invested, I'm interested, so let's see what else he has to say later on. Next, they mention The Matrix and the idea of simulation theory in general, saying it is fiercely debated online and in real life and classrooms. Okay. Laboratories. Which laboratories are testing for simulation theory? Design studios. What? And courtrooms. Okay, that's actually foreshadowing for later in the film, so that's fine. After this is a clip of an audience member with a neckbeard going up to the mic at the Elon Musk 2016 conference, asking if life is a simulation. I can't make this up.
So the idea is, right, any sufficiently advanced civilization could create a simulation. Maybe we're in the simulation. Have you thought about this? And
a lot.
Are we...
Do you ever see something that so beautifully and thoroughly fulfills its own stereotypes without even a shred of self-consciousness? They even show the Glitch in the Matrix subreddit with this dramatic background music.
So are we living in simulation?
Ah yes, Reddit, filled with people who are free to post whatever they think about their lives, entirely without scrutiny, and without any screening for relevance or credibility. A perfect piece of evidence. While watching this, I kept thinking this was a mockumentary, because of how on the nose this was. All of that was just the intro. Now we're diving into the first chapter of the documentary. Let's get into the 4 main men who are featured. They're called eyewitnesses. No, they're not! These are just guys! These are just guys who have no accolades behind them, or if they do, the viewers are not told about them. They all have name cards, but instead of calling them by their names, I think it's much funnier to not do that. So anyway, I'm calling the first guy Lionhead. This brain in a tube is Sugar Pill. This Robo Anubis, and this is Green Thumb. Robo Anubis starts talking about how he's noticed things in the simulation, where he sets his mind to see something in the world, and then later he sees it. That's crazy. Sometimes I get up in the mornings and I think to myself, I would like to see an IHOP today, and then I take my ass to IHOP. It's insane where manifestation can bring me. Jokes aside, yeah, we've all experienced spooky things. Coincidences, synchronicities. A lot of people believe in manifestation, miracles, magic, and I believe in that stuff too. But I also believe in science and facts and logic, and that's something this documentary does not balance well. This guy starts talking about how he's been tracking his days and noticing numerical patterns pop up. Yeah, it's a fun thing to play these little games and notice stuff. I'm sure we've all done this before, like, okay, I'm in this airport and I'm gonna try and find a man with a blue shirt and white shorts. It's like I Spy, sure. He's being very vague about the coincidences that he's seeing.
I would notice that sort of on every 12th day I would see a certain type of thing pop up, and I tracked this over the course of about a year. You know, things that would pop up with a certain regularity. I would that would be when something would happen sort of related to my career.
If you're thinking every 3rd day something happens with my job, you can squint at 100 different things that happen in a day and relate them to anything. Like, damn, it seems like every Wednesday the universe sends me something job-related. Yeah, Jeremy, you have a weekly team meeting on Zoom and you've missed every single one of them. It's your boss emailing you, begging you to show up for once. Okay, I'm just goofing around. Point is, I need to see that spreadsheet. There needs to be specificity and reproducibility. Did you make sure to establish a control variable? Did you only work on this spreadsheet when you felt particularly happy or open-minded? Did you only work on it when you felt miserable? This stuff takes intention, it takes careful observation, and it takes you also trying to counteract and disprove your own theories within reason, which he kind of does. He mentions like, oh, this might be something I'm noticing or something I'm making up in my brain. That's good. I'm glad he knows that and verbalizes the limitations here. Everyone knows basic psychology and confirmation bias at this point. But then the documentary immediately cuts him off and just switches back to Lionhead. Lionhead talks about how, as a kid, he would find himself in liminal spaces with not many people there. And then 1 minute later, he verbally acknowledges that he moved from a bigger city to a city with 500 people. That's your answer! When he was a kid, he imagined the world was a series of movie sets around him that people would switch out. I don't know, that sounds like being a kid that suddenly realizes that they have an entire identity and ego. There is a point, I think, in childhood development where you do genuinely believe that the world is revolving around you, and you haven't quite hit that mark yet where you realize that other people have just as rich and important lives as you do. That's called Sonder. When I was a kid, whenever I rode in the car, I would imagine a leopard or a unicorn or a fantasy creature flying or running alongside the car, and I imagined that this invisible animal would climb up telephone poles and leap over other cars just to keep up. But you don't see me going onto a documentary talking about how I now personally, as an adult, believe our universe created us so that invisible squirrels could run alongside my mom's Honda Civic. Joking aside, it's a cute idea for a kid to believe in. It's weird and it's fascinating. It is not evidence of simulation theory. And Rodney Asher is not asking any challenging questions to these people. He's not contradicting them. He's just letting them say stuff and then immediately cuts to the next scene. Now we get the third metaverse avatar, Sugar Pill, who is this weird brain in a pill-shaped tube. Who decided on the designs for these? I'm mad that they're kinda cool. It's just lame that they're being used like this. He mentions that he has an electrical engineering degree from Harvard and is an entrepreneur. Good for him, good for him. Didn't want to show his face in the documentary though. Wonder why he didn't want to put this on his resume.
I have an electrical engineering degree from Harvard. I'm an entrepreneur. I've got Crohn's disease, and it all plays into to the simulation.
What do you mean? He never explains how. Also, I don't understand why Asher includes these odd moments with the interviewees.
Like our cell phones. Hey, you guys, hey, no, quiet. So,
I think it's some attempt to make them look endearing or down to earth, hashtag they're just like us, but it comes off as random. Is this documentary a joke against people who believe in simulation theory? Is this satire? Am I not getting it, or is this genuine? It's taking itself so seriously that I'm tempted to make this video do a complete 180 and start praising this documentary for being so convincingly annoying. Sugar Pill directly quotes from Elon Musk, accompanied by clips of Elon Musk. You know, instead of having 4 randos and 1 clip from a science fiction author's panel and 2 clips from Elon Musk just saying shit, I would love to have multiple professionals and experts and researchers chime in and take this topic seriously and actually argue why simulation theory can or can't be plausible. That would be so scrumptious. Oh, thank God they just brought on an academic, an Oxford professor. He is the only one, by the way, in this entire 2-hour documentary. He has a ton of stuff under his belt. A bunch of articles on ethics, the future of humanity, artificial intelligence, and probability. And he writes poetry. The article referenced in this documentary is Are We Living in a Computer Simulation?, which is a real published article from Philosophy Quarterly. They quote this as the most influential statistics-based look at simulation theory. And it does look like it is. Wikipedia claims Bostrom as the first person to assert this argument. Apparently, this hypothesis can be classified as philosophical skepticism. It's basically those philosophers who sit around and go, okay, but like, how do we even know that we know? I don't think we can even think, dude. And then they posit useless but interesting questions that ultimately can never be answered, Bostrom's argument is one of these. His propositions about simulation theory are: 1. Humans will go extinct before reaching technological maturity. 2. If there was a higher civilization, they would lose interest in creating ancestor simulation. And 3. We are in a computer simulation. I think that anyone saying there are only 3 truths for our entire existence is already a huge claim to make, and one that feels really restrictive, but go off. And it's such a definitive way to view the world. Why does society have to move towards technology to prove they're advanced? What does that even look like? What is technological maturity? Is it space travel? Is it finally exploring the deep ocean? Is it being able to fly through time or discover parallel universes? We never get a definition of that in the documentary. Instead, Bostrom talks about how he's always argued that we are the simulated ones. Of course, the documentary doesn't show you this, but a quick search brings up his other journal articles after 2003. One of them is in direct response to somebody else's article, and in it, he says, actually, I don't believe we're in a simulation. He takes these backsies. Then again, he wrote this back in 2009, so maybe by 2019, when they began making this documentary, he swung back around, who knows. And in 2011, he also published a patch to his theory because people kept finding flaws in his logic, which is a normal thing in the academic space. People publish one giant thesis and then spend years either defending it or refining it or even abandoning it. And that's fine, that's normal. Too bad the documentary doesn't even share any of that simple and helpful information. But it's an interesting theory. That's the reason I even clicked on the documentary in the first place. I don't know enough about philosophical concepts or probability to dive into the particulars. That's for greater minds than mine. And you might think, oh, well, like any other documentary, this clip will definitely be followed up with someone giving a good counter-argument. Nope. If you do a basic search, again, there are other scholars who contradict Bostrom. Let me ask you a question. Do you think this documentary even mentions these rebuttals? Nope. They just chat back and forth with Bostrom and then move on to the next scene. Even though one of these critics is a physicist, author, YouTuber, musician, and singer, like what the hell, how cool would it have been to have her featured? Jonathan Birch, a British philosopher, wrote a response to Bostrom's article with his own. Plenty of other academics did this as well. His was just one of the first ones that I found on JSTOR. In his article's abstract, which is the bit that summarizes the text, he literally concludes with, "Thus, I don't believe in this." Not saying there's a right or wrong. Documentaries aren't meant for rights or wrongs, but they at least are expected to present as many sides of an argument as possible, right? I'm not gonna measure these men's accolades and pit brain against brain, but the only thing I am going to say is, in 2023, Nick Bostrom was also called out for an email he sent in 1996 where he said black people were stupid and then proceeded to use a racial slur. So we don't need to completely bulldoze all of his claims or him as a person because of one piece of correspondence he sent 2 decades ago. I do believe people can change, and he was also literally 23 years old in 1996, and I have personally met worse college kids than that, even in this day and age. So the least I can say is I hope he learned from that, which he did seem to. But look, I just gave you a very well-rounded series of documented facts, and although I asserted my own general beliefs, I'm also giving you, the viewer, room to come to your own conclusions. This is what it means to be able to healthily consume complex information without me having to drip feed you certain things that I want you to think you know. My response to Mr. Bostrom is that the most plausible explanation here is Occam's razor. All of the simulation talk is just so complicated. Don't get me wrong, simulation theory is interesting if you throw the most compelling arguments at me, but so many people trip over themselves because a lot of arguments that we've seen here are just, well, think about it, and I saw it in the Matrix one time. And none of these people are explaining exactly why anyone would choose to run a simulation of this world. What would the end goal be? But Rodney Asher doesn't want to explore any of that, no! Because right now we get to see the fourth friend, Green Thumb, who says that Elon Musk introduced him to the simulation theory. Somebody say psych right now, please. Green Thumb says some vague stuff about how cool it all sounds to him, and then we enter Chapter 2, Revelations. And now we're back with our buddy, Philip K. Dick, who talks some more about how he believes in simulation theory because he was recovering from anesthesia after a dentist appointment. Okay, so he wrote a book called The Exegesis. about his own experience reliving a past life that he'd think he's led. But past lives are not a subset of simulation theory, right? So then why is this in the documentary? Yeah, the info is correct. As shown in the clips, Philip is recorded to have talked about having hallucinations. He did believe he was living 2 different lives, or had lived a previous life. But guess what? Philip also went through 4 divorces, had abusive relationships, suffered from drug addiction, attempted to end his own life multiple times, wrote letters to the FBI accusing other people of being anti-American, and also thought he was possessed by the prophet Elijah. And the documentary, of course, mentions none of that other information. Because I don't know, maybe they can't handle the fact that someone can be a good science fiction author with amazingly unique ideas, and also someone suffering from intense mental illness. Instead, the documentary would just rather say, oh look, he writes science fiction, because he knows we're in a simulation. Everything is taken at pure value, as if Asher is like, see, it really makes you think. No. We're back to Robo-Nubis, who's talking about how he decided to go visit a sensory deprivation tank, but not from an official business, no. From a random man who has a random tank in his apartment basement. Friends, if a man invites you into his home and offers to show you his basement deprivation tank, run away. And I kind of love that in this documentary, they literally just used a screen recording of Googling sensory deprivation tanks and going on Google Maps and showing this man's entire apartment. I guess it's fine because it's a public business, but geez, here's the thing. Robo-Nubis' experience with simulation theory is more religious and spiritual than anything, and I understand that. If that's what makes you find comfort in life, this idea that you're a series of zeros and ones of code, then live your life. That's great, that's interesting. If this is his version of techno-paganism, then by all means. It's just that all of this is so scrambled. The documentary keeps trying to show us probability and statistical arguments mingled with random childhood anecdotes from faceless men, mixed with spiritual sensory deprivation experiences. Also, I love the way they depicted this man's sense of disembodiment by showing the mesh and the rig underneath the 3D model. So he has this epiphany that he's not real, and nothing is real, and then he casually mentions that he is an ordained minister, also, by the way.
I'm not sure I even knew who the you was I was talking to. I don't know if it was the universe or I am also an ordained minister, so I was raised with that.
What? This cannot be real. I mean, he's right. It can't be real. Someone tell me if I'm missing the joke. Lionhead's now back. Are you getting whiplash yet? Because I am. And Lionhead's still talking about being a kid. All of his stories relate to childhood. It's almost like so many of these experiences are simply symptoms of being a 10-year-old and having an imagination. Okay, I do love the aesthetic of this church here, but what are these terrifying visualizations? For some reason, they linger a lot on this guy's story about being a kid in church and realizing that he felt weird and distanced from his body. Bro, that's my experience with church too. It's called not liking church.
I was nowhere. I was nothing. I felt sort of like loneliness was a thing.
But isn't this a description of dissociation in general? Sometimes you really do be realizing there are tiny living things inside of you, and you have multiple layers of thin, mucus-lined membranes, but these things all have scientific explanations. So I'm surprised that his answer was to think the world was like made of water vapor and we're plugged into the machine. Then Green Thumb chimes in.
But during that time, I was just alone. All we would do for like 2 straight years, just play video games. All the time, video games for years and years. How do I reconcile feeling like I'm in a rut though? Like a pre-programmed rut. I have to go the science route. And the only really blending of religion and science there is would probably be a simulation theory.
He's just describing depression. The 3rd chapter is about digital theology. Good. We're getting into some cool spiritual examination of the theory. I'm sure Rodney Asher will definitely dive into this topic properly and not do the thing where he tosses in a bunch of surface level information with no significance. Someone compares heaven to being debriefed after getting out of a simulation. What? My guy, I could use any analogy for the same thing. People standing in line at the pearly gates, that's like the same way that we all review our life paths when we're queued in line at the Taco Bell. You can make any pattern work with that. Then they briefly mention the brain in a vat concept,
to prove that the external world exists and that he or she is not a brain in a vat in some mad scientist laboratory being kind of fed inputs that mimic what the external world would have.
Yeah, that's a fun thought experiment. I love mind puzzles and stuff, but who cares? So many of these clips used in this film are purely there to be like, haha, see? I'm so smart that I created a paradox. It really makes you think. I mean, what is anyone to do in response to being a brain in a vat? What is anyone to do in response to being in a simulation? I suppose nothing. So would there even be a point in knowing any of this? This is a mess. This is a disorganized mess. Oh god, they just busted out Plato's cave. Oh my god, I am so sick of hearing about Plato's allegory of the cave being used in any damn way you could possibly think to use it. Everybody and their grandma uses the Plato's cave allegory to try and prove some vague idea that we're all just sheeple living with our heads in the sand, and that the real world is out there and we need to find it. Basic synopsis: there are people in a cave. They look at a wall and see shadows. They think the shadows are reality, but really, they're shadows being cast by something behind them, which is real reality. The goal is for them to eventually one day learn how to turn around and see what's causing the shadows, not just the shadows themselves. And apparently this is supposed to be supporting evidence for simulation theory? Okay. Let's do another fun thought experiment. What if I told you that our universe is the stomach of a giant creature, and planets and stars are leftover food crumbs that are being digested over the course of millennia, and we're but small bacteria on the granule remnants of a planetary sandwich that has been eaten? One day our sun will be digested and will explode, and then our solar system will drift for years before swirling down into a black hole, which is this massive creature's poop chute. I could literally use Plato's cave to try and convince you that we're all just seeing the shadows of what we think is real. We see the fabric of our universe, but if we could just turn around and see reality, we'd know that we're all currently sloshing in some giant god's tummy. Now, what if I made an entire documentary about that? I love meaningless thought exercises as long as we all keep agreeing that they are meaningless. They introduced this writer who has, I guess, written blog articles. Let's breeze through this chapter. They mention Hindu myths and how a lot of them have stories of worlds within worlds and dreams within dreams. Yeah, that's pretty freaking cool. But they show footage of James Cameron's Avatar while doing so? Weirdly disrespectful. By the way, when I say that they mention or briefly cover a topic, I'm not exaggerating. Most of the topics they cover are literally not longer than a 3-minute segment. Unless it's someone telling a personal life story, the organization of this film is akin to skipping a stone across a puddle. Nothing really hits. It always bounces. And the water isn't even deep enough for it to sink into anything. Then they talk about the philosophical nature of the villager in Minecraft.
He's a massively simplified version of us. He has free will. He moves about the space as he sees fit. You know, what does he do when you, the avatar, come down into the game of Minecraft? He looks at you as if you are the same as him. Of course, you're not, because you are being controlled by an intelligent higher power.
Here's the thing. There are so many video games that actually tackle existentialism, right? But they chose Minecraft, not the Stanley Parable, not even the one video game that deals with simulation. The Sims, no joke, they do not talk about any other video games in this documentary besides Minecraft and Grand Theft Auto 5. The simulation theory documentary tries to use a video game for analysis, but doesn't use The Sims. It doesn't even use footage from The Sims. That's so weird. I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that The Sims has a predominantly female player base, and this documentary seems to be allergic to women. Between the Reddit, the Minecraft, the Joe Rogan, the Elon Musk, the VTuber models that look like the wet dream of a crypto bro, someone please unplug me from the reality that I'm living in watching this damn movie. For Elon Musk, they keep talking like he's some sort of person who can flip between the higher simulation and lower simulation. I think this shit is what happens when tech bros and gamers accidentally forget what philosophy is and take their own skewed view of life as perfectly sound and reasonable. They're not even aware of their own biases. One man talks about God creating the world and still uses masculine pronouns and monotheistic concepts. Like, can we not at least acknowledge that you're using Western biblical patriarchal structures? So many of these guys are like, man, we don't know anything about the universe. Like, life is so much bigger than we think. but then bro still believes Jesus was white probably. Like, make that make sense. If you're gonna challenge one thing about existence, I'm just saying, challenge it all, brother. You want to get crazy, I'll show you crazy. I'll take your cognitive perception of the world and pull it inside out, but everything feels like it stops at the surface. I'd sooner believe my own fake, weird, God-impreg universe digestion hypothesis over what they're trying to sell me here. Time for Chapter 4. Lionhead talks about being a kid. Once again, only giving us evidence from when he was a literal child. He says his parents would repeat things from the news, and it was weird. Yeah, my mom tells me the exact same stories, using the exact same phrasing. I do this as a 24-year-old when I've forgotten what drama I've told to which friends, so I end up recycling my script if I have to tell a new person an old thing, because it saves mental energy. And I have a question. Do these guys not feel integrated into the simulation? You're not out of the loop just because you believed you noticed a glitch in the Matrix. That just encourages main character syndrome. There's this need for them to be unique, but not just unique, also elevated in some way from the rest of the world that's shuffling around them.
I used to joke about with my brothers and sister that people would just go home and just like sit down and stare at walls when no one was watching. You know, go home and T-pose effectively.
Again, this is all meant to be fun. I love the idea that people randomly go T-pose behind your back, but in the hands of somebody who can't handle this kind of existential thought process, this could ruin someone's brain and encourage paranoia. And even if that were true, that everyone is preloaded, then why don't I T-pose then? This worldview is based on cosmic and existential narcissism, that you have to be the only exception. You're Neo from the Matrix, who over time has obviously been turned into this tech bro Mary Sue. And then there's the obvious argument, even if everyone else in the world T-posed or unloaded when you didn't look at them, who cares and what are you supposed to even do about it? It's just exhausting to have these thought experiments that are like, you can't prove me wrong, but I refuse to give you any well-rounded information. I will instead voice a series of vague observations and then pretend that the entire world operates according to an equally vague imaginary hypothesis. What conclusions can be drawn then? The more frustrated I get, the more mean I feel myself becoming. Why do they keep zooming in on Bostrom's face like this? And there's a whole segment where they bring on a self-professed NPC. Oh, this is literally just a boy with such low self-esteem that he claims he's a side character even in his own life. He says he has programmed scripts when he works at the grocery store. Baby, that's just called having a customer-facing job. Whatever.
I have a specific list of things that I need to accomplish when greeting a customer and checking out their items.
When this stimuli happens to him, generally speaking, he reacts in this way. It's not terribly different from the code that tells the chickens of Minecraft what to do.
When a stimulus happens to him, he reacts. That's just like coding. Gamers and tech bros discover the concept of cause and effect. Now things are delving into dangerously weird conspiracy theory territory. Sugar Pill talks about how there aren't really 7 billion people on Earth. They're all just AIs, and there are only a few real people. He's calling people automatons, but you can just walk down a street and turn and actually talk to someone to see if they're real. You can throw a soda onto someone and get knocked out. And you know what? Yeah, maybe they'll T-pose once you're unconscious, but best believe you'll have a black eye the next day. It's really sad to hear stuff like this because it just allows you to dissociate and believe that you're one of the important ones, right? If life's a simulation and there are all of these AIs, then which people matter to them, huh? Is it the cis white males that matter? Because that's mostly the only perspective that's being featured in this film. I'm curious, how would each of these men take this theory and apply it to inequality? How would they explain murder? How would they explain famine, disease, war? If we are simulated bodies, then why would our bodies do things that would be considered a waste of computational energy? Why do we hiccup? Why do we have certain organs and bones that we've evolved past needing? Why do we get tinnitus for like 2 seconds and then it goes away? And none of that is covered in this 2-hour-long film. But instead, it starts getting into the whole catastrophizing aspect of this. They start talking about how if some people begin to wholeheartedly believe in simulation theory, they're worried people will become extremely violent and disrespectful of others' importance and their life significance. So they pepper in some FPS game footage and clips from World War Z.
Inability to separate real world from digital realities when you have something like going after someone who is constructed as an other, you kind of treat reality like these are digital disposable bodies.
She's right. and I agree with her wholeheartedly. Such a strangely based moment in such an unhinged documentary. This is my least favorite person of the film. I think he has the most off-base, unsupported, poorly thought out beliefs.
And so one guy might plug in, he's Kanye West. But then you have people who log in. They used to play a lot and they were really good, but then they unplugged. And the reflection in our reality would be a celebrity that is who was really good and then just fell from grace. They would do something. They would go totally like, they'd be going straight, and all of a sudden they'll be doing something that's totally perpendicular to their normal behavior pattern. Because in a video game, you're doing it well. Then all of a sudden you just get bored. And I've done that myself in the I've been playing Grand Theft Auto, and
you can't compare Grand Theft Auto to real-ass people. Celebrities are under immense pressure and constant surveillance and exhibition, so their brains tell them to act out in dangerous ways. And me? Well, I play Grand Theft Auto. Like, no, you're describing characters and mechanics that we created. Our brains work with a certain type of logic, so the technology that we make helps us take shortcuts in logic and reasoning, and by doing that, we can use those shortcuts to create more and more complex digital products. Now, how is this documentary going backwards and saying, that's so weird, these digital products that we've made are so similar to us when we do our real life logic and reasoning? Yeah, it's because it's our intellectual offspring. We need to use game simulations in order to emulate our real world as it exists. Why are you trying to apply this the inverse way? Here's another big argument I have with simulation theory, especially in the way that they compare themselves to being video game avatars. No one would want to control you when you're just eating pizza and playing Minecraft all day. If there were higher civilizations, why the hell would they want to experience that? I play The Sims, and I like seeing my little babies walk around and do cool things, and get their moodlets up and stuff. But guess what? Within 1 hour, I'm ruining their lives. Someone's a vampire now, another person's a mermaid who's drying out, they're both about to get impregnated by aliens. So why is it that the majority of humans on Earth aren't experiencing this crazy, wacky, wild stuff? Oh, because we're all NPCs, and only the celebrities are the ones getting controlled by a player god. Well then, buddies, I hate to break it to you, but you're also NPCs. You see how this theory crumbles in literally every way? By the way, nobody's an NPC. Every human has a fully enriched life, worthy of living, no matter how plain it may seem to outsiders. And it's unfair to assume otherwise just because people may not be directly affecting your own life. That just shows a strange lack of empathy and social understanding. Alrighty, let's whiz through some of this gunk. They bring up the infamous flight hijacking in 2018. Wendigoon made a great video on this, by the way, but they try and take this tragic story and present it as if the man was a proponent of simulation theory. While flying in the air, he talks to air traffic control and he mentions that he plays video games. That's it. And one guy is like, did you hear him say he thought we lived in a video game? That's not even what he said though, bro. He only mentioned video games in terms of how he knew how to fly the plane. Is this supposed to be used for shock value? It's kind of distasteful, but it will get worse. Don't worry. Part 5. This part is even more about the Matrix movies. Please, please, please don't make me have to make an entire video on the Matrix movies. Please no, it's been done so many times. I haven't even seen the damn movies. I don't even want to have to watch 9 hours of content for this one video. I can't do it. So they keep rapidly changing scenes. I literally cannot keep up. They mention the Mandela effect, which yes, I do believe in, as a fun social psychology thing. This is the stuff I'm looking for when you're trying to prove to me that simulation theory is plausible. I'm looking for giant major occurrences in the world that no one else can explain. I'm not looking for one guy to tell me that he goes to the grocery store and spaces out. I'm looking for studies on social phenomena. There's this whole stupid, pointless scene where Sugar Pill talks about how he lived in Mexico one time. He drags this story out like nobody's business. To summarize, he and some drunk guys are speeding on the wrong side of the highway. They get lucky that no one was on the road. He tries and insinuates that this must mean something in the simulation was unloaded at that time of night, or it was just 3 a.m. and nobody wanted to be out, but go off. And then later that night, they end up flipping the car off the bridge and landing on the roof, but no one died, thankfully. Yeah, I guess that is a little crazy. Mexican police show up. Sugar Pill talks about how he's in deep trouble because he's an American, so they're gonna use him for, like, ransom, I guess. In the end, a random guy walks up and gets them out of the situation. Firstly, sir, you're traumatized. I'm so sorry that happened to you, genuinely. But the fact that you have to detach and claim that the whole thing was just another part of the grand fake simulation of life, it feels sad. He tries and takes this traumatic experience and says that The simulation programmed the situation to go well for him specifically. He was the main character. The documentary doesn't trust its viewers to pay attention for more than a few minutes at a time. Stories and topics will only last for a couple minutes tops, and then they will quickly switch to a whole different testimony, a different clip, a different 3D animated scene, etc. And that's great, because it's also a way to prevent the audience from having to think about any topic long enough for them to realize that so much of this is so diluted. It jumps to a man named Joshua Cook on the phone being interviewed. He talks about his love for the Matrix movies, then it jumps back to Green Thumb talking about how we're all probably in a giant orb. I love this visual, I gotta say. Put me in the orb. I would like to be in the orb and let people ponder me. Oh, and look, we're switching over again. Lionhead is back, and he's talking about GANs.
Generative Adversarial Network. You have two AIs, and they're competing with each other. What are people, if not generative adversarial networks? Maybe this is why we're always arguing, because we exist specifically to refine and hone things.
And then he says, yeah, man, that's life. That's what humans are. We're just GANs. well, yes, but also no. We made the GANs using the same systems of logic that humans use in real life. Once again, you're going backwards up the chain of relations. That's like seeing a cotton t-shirt and going, wow, isn't it so weird that our bodies are perfectly molded in a way that fits a cotton t-shirt? That's kind of suspicious. We made the t-shirts according to our own disposition. If our brains operated any other way, then GANs would probably not exist, because we wouldn't have made them. You know what? You're right. Life is just like that. Socks are the GAN to my feet. Foot tried to be cold, sock tried to give warmth. They're locked in an interdimensional battle, simulacrum against simulacrum. Before the viewer even has time to come up with these arguments, though, we've switched back to this mystery Joshua guy who talks about how he went to Hot Topic and bought a black trench coat after seeing The Matrix. Look, there's nothing wrong with having something you strongly believe in. Enjoying things is cool. Love that for you. And then he buys a gun. And then he's talking about how he was bullied at school and abused at home. Okay. He basically says he wants to be in a higher position of power like Neo was. Not sure why this has to manifest in his life as aggression and threat of violence with a weapon, but we all know how this goes. I wonder what the logical conclusion will be. Part 6. The real world. They sprinkle in some stuff about how fiction can predict reality, and yeah, that's true to an extent. It's bound to happen. But how does this actually relate to simulation theory? They show this guy who I haven't really been paying much attention to. He doesn't show up often, but he's there. He's very level-headed. He talks about how when the world becomes overwhelming, when things get bad, of course there are these theories that pop up about reality and existence and the point of it all. Plus, with technology and constant informational overload every day, things become surreal to people. The world becomes diluted. And he has really good points. I would love to hear him talk more about that, but then they cut him off by doing this stupid ass glitching effect. For no reason. Instead, we're back to Joshua, whose phone call voiceover is only describing more and more unsettling things. I think I should go ahead and put a content warning here because it only gets worse. And his story is going to end in real-world violence involving a shotgun that he purchased one day shortly after he watched The Matrix. Anyway, they cut again, and they start talking about how video games have glitches and can be unplayable. And real world feel bad, so clearly real world must be video game. But then we jump back to Joshua Cook, who, for the next 8 minutes straight, describes in gory detail what he did to his parents one night, taking his shotgun, putting on his black trench coat, putting on headphones, listening to rock music. He looks at his giant poster of The Matrix on his wall, picks up a phone and does this long verbatim speech from the movie. He says he was convinced he was trapped in the Matrix. And then he proceeds to murder both of his parents in cold blood. No confrontation, no explanations, he just silently kills them.
And moments later, the police arrived at the driveway of my house with their guns drawn. About 5 or 6 of them with their guns drawn on me and told me to get down on my knees, and of course, they arrested me.
We now know why he's doing a phone call interview, because he's calling from prison. There are no words for this. He finishes his story by talking about how much shock he was in, how he felt numb, how he was confused because it wasn't like what he thought it would be. Yeah, because there is no Matrix. There is no higher simulation. There is no win condition that will make you wake up into some hyper-tech civilization where they'll hand you pina coladas and you can go sit on a digital beach somewhere. You're a murderer now, and you're just as stuck here as you were before, with an objectively worse life. This is a sad story. He knows it. He also shows remorse. He knows what he did was horrible. I am glad that this was included, even though it just seemed so tonally out of nowhere. It is a cautionary tale. It's a good one, to remind people that this mentality can go too far. But this entire segment was slipped in after we just finished talking about frickin' GANs and GTA 5. And the shitty thing is, these 8 minutes of this 2-hour documentary, this is why the documentary is described as a part true crime horror story. They're using it for some sort of Hulu clickbait. And then after that, they immediately jump into conclusions. Yeah, let's see how Rodney Asher chooses to perfectly wrap up this film. I'm sure it will be as thorough and mature and intentional as it possibly can be. I won't hold my breath. There are still 20 minutes left, so Joshua is back. It talks about his prison sentence.
And I told him, I said, I did my thing just like Neo in the Matrix. And they began to think that they may have an insanity defense. They said that I, quote, harbored a bona fide belief that I was living in the virtual world of the Matrix.
He was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and the documentary tries to insinuate that his case created the Matrix insanity defense, but he wasn't the first person to use it. Actually, he didn't even use it at all. He just pled guilty. He didn't even want to claim insanity, and he was 19 years old at the time. As usual, the film ricochets past this and just streams through a bunch of topics. They try and wrap this up in a semi-thoughtful way. This guy starts talking about, how can I live in a false world with other people if I don't think they're real? You just accept it, because what else are you going to do about it? Whether the world is false or real, it doesn't matter. We still have puppies and rainbows, even if they're made out of code. Trust me, the autumn leaves aren't suddenly going to blink out of existence, and your iced latte is still going to taste bomb AF whether it's simulated or not. Just enjoy what you have. Why does it have to lead to violence or escape or winning? You are alive, and that's what matters. You're getting to experience something. The fact that you are born as you is already an insanely improbable thing. That's already beauty. There are definitely things we can't know. There are colors we can't even see, dimensions we can't access probably, speeds our bodies can't reach, places our species cannot get to. We don't have to cry and whine about it and thrash against it like some child who doesn't understand that a seatbelt in a car is protecting them, not choking them. To claim you have all the answers rolled up into your Minecraft server is oof. Alright, let's give the documentary some credit. Although so much of this past hour and a half has been nearsighted to say the least, now they're actually leaning back and looking more objectively at certain claims. Lionhead says he can actually see people as real people now, so that's great. And he talks about how his worldview was maybe limited when he was a literal child. Well, yes! And then this blog author talks about how she thinks the remedy for dissociation is sex. So apparently she's saying just have more sex. This will allow you to stay grounded.
Loneliness and isolation and trauma play very heavily into the kinds of realities that people construct. And I think the erotic as a dynamic in reality is an antidote to solipsism. It's an antidote to a lack of empathy.
I mean, I think the language that she uses is fascinating. It's just so hilarious to tell all of these gamers and tech bros to simply touch another person and get laid in order to escape the simulation. That's certainly one way to do it. But what about my asexual homies out there? Come on now. Robo Nubis ends his segment by saying there might be a video game player controlling him. By the way, he automatically assumes that this player is a he. No other possibility to it. It's so amazing how these guys have been like, we need to unleash our minds. There could be an amazingly complex and advanced society controlling us. And yet they still think that this ultra giga mecha society would operate under the gender binary? Girl. Anyway, he says that he wants to make his player proud. So that's a sweet sentiment. But isn't that just like neo-techno Christianity? How is that different from a guardian angel? Sugar Pill talks about how after we die, maybe we could wake up in an arcade and turns out our entire life was us plugging into an arcade machine that's meant to simulate life. Gotta admit, I do love the image, but it fits a little bit more for a Black Mirror episode. And maybe this isn't the best thing to say after we've covered a real-world murder only 5 minutes prior in the film. We're back with Green Thumb. He's my least favorite.
Hypothetically, what if tomorrow I dress in all white, I slick my hair back, building up almost like a religion or just more of a philosophy of, hey, we are in a simulation. And we get to like Star Wars levels of spread across the galaxy.
And I just don't think he realizes that what he's describing is a cult. And also, I don't know, theological space colonialism. I don't know. And then he brings out his vape. This is a nightmare. Someone says, oh, putting this documentary out into the world will disrupt the simulation. This is gonna create waves. Friend, I assure you, I did not know this existed. I don't think anyone looked. No one clapped. This came out 3 years ago. No one sniffed. Now Lionhead is still talking about the simulation and giving it new metaphors, even though we have like 6 minutes left. I thought we were wrapping up. Y'all, this freaking 3D model keeps making me laugh so hard. It's not poorly made, it's fine, but something about the expression, this isn't an emotion that exists.
Maybe this is a situation where the simulation is bad, we shouldn't be in it, and this is a failsafe. They're the ones who are supposed to pilot the ship. They're knocked out, and so they create this movie for them to watch so that they start questioning reality and therefore get out of it.
This is so stupid. This whole part is so stupid. I think Lionhead is not the person who should have had the last say of this film. He says, I'm certain that when I die, I will wake up somewhere else. Again, yikes, not the best way to end the documentary. To be like, yeah, we can escape the simulation through death. We'll just wake up somewhere else. Okay, just bulldoze over what we learned from the Joshua Cook situation. Let's not encourage death in any capacity. And that's it. That's the end of the documentary. Thank goodness. They have the audacity to use a Plato's Cave aesthetic for the credits scene. The credits are wild, y'all. I do not believe this many people worked on this documentary. You are gaslighting me. These credits are gaslighting me. Now it's time for my own conclusions. I feel like I learned nothing. I feel like I just over-exercised my brain. And not because of the content in the film, but because of me fighting for my life to not sink into whatever weird stoner headspace this documentary thinks it is delivering to you. The person who created this, Rodney Asher, also did 2 other notable documentaries listed in the synopsis called Room 237 and The Nightmare. Room 237, released in 2012, is about The Shining and a bunch of fan theories surrounding the movie and the making of the movie. If you find the sources that the documentary featured, it's literally just average Joes on the internet who have written about their personal conspiracy theories. The synopsis on Wikipedia starts off normally, where one theory is like, oh yeah, Native American cultural assimilation, and that's cool. And then it features other fan theories, including how one guy thinks The Shining was complicit in faking the moon landing. Great. Though Room 237 was received well by viewers, a lot of critics were pretty much like, yeah, you're overthinking it, and these claims are ridiculous. The Nightmare from 2015 was about sleep paralysis, but it doesn't seem to go super in-depth about the science of sleep paralysis. It uses books, YouTube comments, and forums as its main sources of information. So Asher and his team just kind of took people's stories about sleep paralysis and then made reenactments of them. That's cool, but not sure if it's a documentary per se, because he consulted 0 scientists and 0 doctors about the topic of sleep paralysis. Normally, I'd say using online spaces with a bunch of comments and forum posts is a unique way to gather information for a documentary, but I'm sure it was very convenient for filmmaker Rodney Asher, seeing as you don't have to pay anyone for a testimony if you simply ask people online to give you a bunch of testimonies for free. Still, I'm not going to be too harsh. If you're a new filmmaker or a really small indie filmmaker, then yeah, it's understandable to produce things that are less polished and cheaper and easier to make. Either way, his stuff still got really popular. Apparently the Cannes and Sundance film festivals showed both Room 237 and The Nightmare when they both released. The thing Asher does that I think makes him stand out is the way he takes fandom spaces and brings them to the big screen. Which makes sense as to why these films got so popular in 2012 and 2015. This was the era of internet fandom. People on forums wanted to be heard, and I'm sure they were psyched at seeing their social platform posts elevated into an official film. I liked the pop culture and the entertainment angle. I think it's fun. I think it's refreshing. And I think the entire thing reads like a 14-year-old boy wrote and produced it. It was incredibly entertaining. I love seeing things from the internet on my TV screen. However, I've never seen something that tackles an insanely deep topic and also refuses to use any real meaningful deep information to explore the topic with. I appreciated the very surface level, darker side of simulation theory and all of the ways that it can be misinterpreted and misused. But Rodney Asher absolutely dropped the ball in terms of organization of the editing. It is insane to have an actual first-hand detailed account of a murder given by the murderer, and then end the film with a random faceless ass guy telling you he thinks it's okay to die because you'll just wake up in a Chuck E. Cheese arcade cabinet. The tone is a mess. How is the viewer supposed to remember Joshua's story and end on a somber note when they're watching frickin' Reginald from Monster House running through a spaceship that's headed towards the sun? I just think this was barely taken seriously. Or maybe that's my own bias. Maybe I can barely take this seriously. I don't know. Here are some suggestions I have. Please feature more people with academic accreditation to their name. Please show us the people that you're trying to use as main sources of testimony. It's fine to pull from the internet, but don't try to tout forum posts as unshakable evidence. And for goodness sake, include some pure skeptics. Not just people who try and see things objectively. I want an absolutely crabby person to sit on camera and directly contradict some of the claims that were given here. And for goodness sake, if you're going to have random people say stuff they believe in with no factual basis whatsoever, then take the time to actually scrutinize their beliefs or provide some context for it. Also, look into The Sims. Why didn't you talk about The Sims? No one piece of media can do everything. I know. I'm not trying to ask this to be perfect or change its entire premise, just the execution. In my opinion, Rodney Asher did not wrestle with this existential question. He barely even touched it. He just collected remnants of other people, some of whom aren't even wrestling with the question. They're just answering it using the least evidence possible with as little self-awareness as possible. This is what happens when basic philosophy and personal life journeys get warped by tech bros who think everything has to logically be explained using computer science. And to the people that wholeheartedly believe in simulation theory without any skepticism, I understand the appeal, I really do. I'm not going to even rule it out completely, but it's kind of an empty argument. Nothing can be proven, and even if it was, nothing can be done about it. In my opinion, the simulation theory and this obsession with the Matrix is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe you are trapped in a matrix. You are trapped in a world that's not real. That's because you are making other people seem fake in your brain. You are separating yourself from reality in your own head. The meaning of life isn't going to be an up, down, A, B, start cheat code. Go outside, sip fresh water from the nook of a raspberry. Pick a dandelion and watch the seeds catch the breeze. Pet a tiny creature. Observe the way sunlight dapples through the forest canopy above. Watch as a water drop slides off a petal after a fresh rain. The real world is beautiful and quite grounding. You will find meaning in that, I promise. Tech bros discover nature. They see a leaf and they're like, yo, low-key, that's kind of the blockchain, bro. I'm gonna make this into an NFT. I hope you liked this video. And you know what? I'm sure I missed a ton of things as well. I'm sure I am just as biased and foolish as the ones that I point and laugh at. I will let you decide. Please give cool info or input into the comments section below. And if you are well versed in philosophy or physics or probability, I would love to hear your take on this topic as well. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.